Welcome, everybody. This is David Bloom, co-founder of Next TMT, and this here podcast, Next TMT Talks, with my co-founder, Daniel Frankel, and Jon Giegengack,
Perfect.
the man with the funnest name in the world. I love saying Jon Giegengack. Jon is the founder and partner of Hub Entertainment Research, which does amazing stuff about the evolution of sports. You got a new report. You want to just sketch out big picture stuff and then let Dan kind of
Sure.
pick it apart with all the cool bits?
I'll introduce it. It's What's the Score? The Evolution of Sports Fans and Sports Media. Apparently, according to Jon, the firm, which is based in New Hampshire, correct, Jon?
Yep, Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Right. Oh, you got the only coastline in all of New Hampshire. It's like 10 miles, and Portsmouth's right there, right?
It's the shortest coastline of any state that has one, and we're right on it.
Yeah.
The company surveys over 3,700 sports fans twice a year.
Yep.
And asks them their TV consumption habits.
Correct.
And Jon, maybe tell us about this latest, the Wave 5 version of this report, which is coming out today, here Monday.
Yeah. So this is the fifth wave, so 2.5 years since we started this study. And the company's been around for 13 years. So this was relatively kind of a late addition. But the reason that we decided to start this was that two reasons. One, we were starting to see 2.5 years ago, companies like Amazon, beginning to do more than just dip their toe in the water of sports, signaling we thought that there would be a much bigger investment and bigger moves into competing for sports rights and more things available on streaming. Then the other reason is because sports is both so important and so different from things like scripted content. So it's different in the way that people consume it, obviously. And it's especially important because, especially 2.5 years ago, sports was one of the main things that was keeping cord cutting from progressing at a quicker rate. So we felt like this is something that was really important for us to cover, really that we can't afford not to cover it. And so fortuitously, right around the time that we started to field this research was when we saw some of the bigger moves in sports, like YouTube TV getting the NFL Sunday ticket rights, the NBA renegotiating and putting a lot more of their games on Amazon. And then this year, some really interesting moves, including Paramount getting exclusive rights to the UFC. So all the UFC content on one service.
The key finding one of this report was interesting. It's growing comfort for sports fans with not having pay TV. It starts off 2024, 24% of self-invited sports fans say they've cut the cord or never had it. And by this year, you're up to 31%. So kind of significant increase, but a virtual pay TV services like YouTube TV don't count in that equation. If you have them, you're still a cord cutter.
Yeah, the way we counted it for this one, you're still a cord cutter. You just don't have traditional cable or satellite. And increasingly, those virtual MVPDs are, a lot more similar to cable than they are differently.
Right. The virtual part is the only difference, it feels like, anymore.
If you're a viewer, you can't really no one can tell how the delivery happens. But that being said, we are seeing the gap between how many sports fans don't have a traditional cable bundle versus people that aren't necessarily sports fans or just TV viewers in general. That gap is starting to close. And we know it's a big deal for the future of traditional linear TV because the big things that keep people from cutting cable so far are sports and local content and news, especially local news.
I just was going to say, this is really interesting because we had just had our only FCC commission chairman, Brendan Carr, the favorite bureaucrat in Dan's pantheon of favorite bureaucrats, actually lay out a fairly interesting point about how they've begun a study of sports on broadcast and how much harder it's getting for people to find things and how important having the NFL in particular for local broadcast stations is to finance the operations of those local broadcast news organizations. Without the money that comes in from the advertising around the NFL games in particular, there is no local broadcast station economics, which I find really interesting and I think a fairly spot on analysis, but it is an interesting thing to think about. So one of the things you're suggesting, it sounds like, is the viewers aren't telling the difference, but the local broadcast stations sure will.
The viewers are absolutely telling that they can tell the difference. One of the things that we've seen throughout the time that we've been tracking streaming is that as more streaming platforms proliferate and there's more original shows on those platforms that are exclusive, and the whole, as more shows kind of get licensed in between different streaming services, people get very confused about where to find their shows. And that causes some frustration when it comes to scripted TV, a good amount of frustration. But at least with scripted TV, all the big platforms now have their own buzzy originals with high budgets and movie star actors and directors. So if you can't find one specific show, that might be a little bit frustrating, but there will probably be something else you can find to check that box.
Chances are really good, actually, that there will be 17 other shows virtually identical with slightly different stars because, like, when's the last time Hollywood did something different? Thank God AI hasn't made things all the same. Hollywood did that all by itself. But
and
anyway.
with sports, it's totally different though, because if you want to watch the NFL playoffs, or like I'm from Philadelphia, I love the Eagles. If I want to watch the Eagles and I can't find that game, there isn't another substitute. It's the last kind of truly unique content that's out there, and the people that care about it care about sports a lot more than they care about the other things on TV. So when you take someone's Sunday NFL ritual, for instance, and you make that more difficult, let alone maybe make it impossible if it's on a service they don't have, the repercussions of that are swift and harsh. And so we see throughout the waves of this research, we've seen people excited about the idea of having sports available on streaming platforms that they use already, like Netflix, but quickly mounting frustration over having difficulty finding the sports they want to watch. And the greatest difficulty seems to be with the big sports. So the ones like the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball that people are used to having all available on their cable package, you just have to channel around. The frustration is greatest with those because the change from how you used to watch those and how you watch them today is the most dramatic.
This is interesting. Your own research, when asked, is streaming making sports harder to find and consume? 47% say, nearly half, it's about the same. 24% say no, it's gotten harder, but 28% say no, it's actually easier. It doesn't. There's other portions of the research that suggest there is a pain point, but this sort of basic question doesn't indicate that.
Yeah, that particular question, that's among everybody in the whole survey, so avid fans and casual sports fans, and it's also among fans of all sports. So if you look, I think there's another chart after that one where we break it down by fans of specific sports, and you can see there's a big difference. So if you're a fan of the Premier League, for instance, and you're in America, it's easier today to find that sport than it might have been in the past. Yeah. Or if you're a fan of like Formula One.
EPL wasn't there before, and now it's well situated on Saturday mornings on Peacock, and I think Fox carries some games, and but they're there, and they weren't there 10 years ago. If you are an Arsenal man, just saying, you were out of luck, and now it's like, how do you spend your Saturday morning? Well, I'm on Peacock. Right.
Yeah, and then there's another question too that I think is in the deck that we sent you that more than 80% of fans say that at least some of the time they feel frustrated trying to find a game, and so I think that frustration is like no one there is no amount of frustration that I could have trying to find a game that's going to make me not care about the Eagles anymore. But where I think it does start to cause a problem is when these sports are trying to bring in new fans that aren't familiar with the sport, or turn those kind of casual fans into more avid ones. That's where I think the speed bumps that get put up in terms of easily finding something they want to watch could start to hurt the brands, especially of maybe the second tier of sports, if this kind of confusing ecosystem is allowed to remain as confusing as it is over the long run.
This is really compelling. The NFL, which is at the top of the confusion food chain, according to the survey, 42% say it's gotten harder to find the games and stream them. Only 19% say it's gotten easier.
It's got 7 partners now? Is that right?
Maybe the NFL, because it's the NFL and they roll that way, but just behind them is the NHL, with nearly 30% saying it's getting harder to find the games. Like Jon just said, it's a tougher value proposition for them. They don't have quite the draw power.
Yeah, I mean,
Jon, real quickly though, can you also contrast this frustration with specific sports with frustration with all the streaming services in general? Yes, you can find another Brad Pitt movie or whatever, or another sci-fi film, or another genre and all that, and it's not quite the same. But they spent $100 million getting you psyched up to go see that movie, and all of a sudden you can't figure out where it is. Is it different?
It's the same. It's more pronounced with sports, but it's the same problem. And when we ask people just about TV in general, like, what are the features of a service that matter the most to you, including ones that maybe you don't have access to right now, the number one thing that people mention time after time is a universal search. So some way to look across all the different services they have to find, be it linear, be it streaming, and find that show that they're trying to watch, as opposed to have to go into one app and then come back out and go into another app and then come back out of that and go into another app and even remember all the apps that you have. So that feeling is what is behind the success of companies like Roku. Their entire reason for existence is just to make TV simpler to watch. And they have done a really kind of tremendous job at that. They have some of their own original shows. They have the Roku channel, they have Howdy, but mostly their existence is the only reason they're there is just to make it easier for you, the viewer, to find the thing that you want to watch in the shortest amount of time. And one of the things that we tested in this research was asking sports fans about different features or products that are on the market designed to make sports simpler. And one of the things that we asked about was the Roku Sports Zone, where you can log on and you can see, if you're into F1 or if you're into football, NFL or college football, whatever, it gathers all of the content, including live games, including news, including documentaries about that sport, all into one place. And all that content can be coming from different providers. But you, the user who doesn't probably care what platform it's on, you can find it all in one spot. And from that launch point, make your way to the content you're interested in, or discover some other stuff that's related to what you're interested in that maybe you didn't know about.
Is there, you mentioned in passing this notion of converting the casual fan into a more intense fan, and that's probably an alchemical kind of process that involves something like the Philosopher's Stone. But that being said, are there things they can be doing, are doing, should be doing that could help hasten that deeper connection and engagement?
Yeah, for sure. One of the biggest things that we found was sports documentaries. So if you think about, in the modern era, the one that's gotten the most attention was Drive to Survive on Netflix. And I think that's a great example, because if you've never watched Formula One before and you just sort of channel around and you stumble across it, NASCAR looks boring enough as it is. With Formula One, the cars don't even look like cars. You can only see one turn at a time, and it's really hard to tell who's in the lead. They rarely pass each other. And you have to really watch it for a long time to get the appreciation of the things that are happening below the surface. But a great way to get people invested in a sport who don't understand the sport is get them invested in the people. And that's why I think Drive to Survive was super effective. We saw this in our research. I think Morning Consult did a survey back at the time to see how many new F1 fans were generated in the US from that show. And because you get invested in these people, then, like, my wife is a huge soccer fan, football fan all of a sudden because of Welcome to Wrexham. She doesn't know much about soccer, but she loved the story. Everybody loves the story. It's very compelling. And as soon as you care about the people, you start to care enough to watch the game, and then you get an appreciation for the game. And a lot of people forget, my favorite example of this goes all the way back to 2007 with The Ultimate Fighter on Spike TV. If you guys remember that, the UFC was borderline almost out of business. And at the last minute, I can't remember if they pitched the show or Spike pitched it to them, but they had a similar problem. If you stumble across the UFC on television, you don't know anything about boxing, or especially if you don't know anything about jiu-jitsu, there's not a lot there. They didn't have any fights on Spike. They only had the pay-per-view events. Right. But so that, if you remember that whole show, the whole show was basically like the real world with a MMA match at the end. And most of the show was about who ate whose peanut butter or who peed on whose pillow, and them arguing at the dinner table. But then you get to know these guys, and then there's a fight at the end. And as soon as you know these two guys, it's way more engrossing. And so even though that was back before the age of social media, there was no TikTok, there was no Instagram. After the first season of The Ultimate Fighter, the pay-per-view sales for the UFC went up immediately 450%. And that effect is even easier to get today with all of the social media that there is to leverage the athletes or leverage kind of the behind the scenes action. In our research, documentaries were extremely effective at both engaging existing fans and making them more interested, but also in getting new fans to follow the sport for the first time. And many of the people who followed it for the first time after watching a documentary became fans and continued to follow it after the documentary was over. So I think
it'll
that's
be really interesting to see how this plays out for Formula One, which debuts this weekend, because they're going to be on Apple TV for the first time. Apple TV is going to share Drive to Survive, the newest season, with Netflix. They're both going to show it, which I find really interesting. And then C15 has announced a new deal last week that they're going to be doing the F1 channel with the sort of junior, the academy, basically. It's sort of like their minor league, but all that stuff, they're going to have all that live content.
Yeah, and they're riding the back still of the Brad Pitt movie,
Yeah.
which was great. And so
Yeah,
so
it was
all of
great.
that I think is a really, streaming brings lots and lots and lots of challenges to traditional, just to the business of trying to get people to discover a show or a sport and watch it. But it also creates all of these new opportunities that were much harder to pull off before. And especially if you think about a sport that's seasonal, like Hard Knocks on HBO has been around forever, but documentaries are a great way to stay connected with your fans in the off season when there's no games to
Yeah.
report on. Or if you
I
look
did
at
a
how much
panel
bigger, like
last night. John, I did a panel last night with that included a guy from a big agency that's about to go through a name change. I won't get into the agency, but one of the things he talked about, he used to work for the Falcons and the Clippers in the NFL and NBA respectively. And the challenges he faces as a manager representing these athletes now for the agency he works for, they are brands, they are corporations, they have their own contrail of
yep,
fame and engagement. And for a franchise, they have to figure out how they take advantage of that and get people connected to the team when the players are bigger than the team in some cases, right?
yeah. I mean, the University of Alabama has their own original content studio now, precisely to do exactly what you talked about. And
Yeah.
not only is that a big opportunity to kind of leverage behind the scenes things or leverage the online presence of an athlete, it's an opportunity that's so big that you can't afford to not do it. And I think the tools that are available to leagues, to teams, to individual athletes, and to the companies that are distributing all of that are more powerful and more numerous than they've ever been before.
There was
Interesting.
another study, Altman Salon put out this week suggesting that younger demographics, younger millennials and Gen Z are really into highlights and the
Yep.
kind of documentary and scripted sports stuff that you talk about. Does that show up in your research at all, that the old farts like us are just still watching game?
Well, the old farts like us are also using social media a lot more, but it's especially pronounced among younger people and among younger fans. I think it was 54% of them said that they get most or all of their non-live sports content, so news and highlights and clips, from social media. And when we ask people each year that we ask, we say, "Are you getting more of your non-live content from social now than you did a year ago?" Most of them say that yes, they are. So there's this kind of feedback loop of more and
Yeah.
more of the clips and highlights being consumed on demand on a phone. And the stuff that I used to do when I was in college, like sit with all my buddies and watch Game Day every Sunday or Sports Center, that, at least among these younger people, while they still watch that stuff, sometimes the home of that non-live is on social media or on a mobile device.
It sounds like particularly YouTube, though, right? I mean, YouTube is
Yeah.
really the
Yep.
home, not just social media, but YouTube in particular.
Yeah, well,
So,
I'm just consulting my notes here because this one was a little bit more complicated. YouTube was so we talked to people that they had to use all four of these. They had to use YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook for sports. So this is kind of like a subsample of people who use all four of those. But then we asked people, out of those four, which one of these is the best at each of these different things. And so YouTube was seen as the best overall. But its biggest lead were on things like reliable news and information, timely access to videos and clips, and best behind the scenes access. But there were other areas where some other platforms outperformed. So TikTok, for instance, was the number one choice in terms of interacting with other fans, so the
mm,
community aspect of it. And Instagram was the number one for having the most accounts directly from players. So the interesting thing is that YouTube kind of performs well at the things you'd most associate with regular television. TikTok and Instagram perform the best at the community aspect, so interacting with players or interacting with other fans. And again, I think that's a whole other dimension of how you can communicate with your fan base today. And it goes, the same goes for scripted TV. There's lots and lots of communities that spring up around scripted IP. But some of these social platforms, especially like the vertical video ones, are seen as the best for interacting with other people like you that are following the same stuff.
So how many of these reports do a year?
What's sorry?
uh,
How many of these research? I know you cover a lot of different aspects of media
Oh, how
structure.
many? Yeah, we do the sports one twice a year. We have, like on scripted TV specifically, we have a series of 6, so it's every other month. We do one twice a year on bundles now. We do one twice a year on ad-supported TV, so to see how people feel about ads and where the momentum is heading in terms of new people signing up for ad supported or ad free. We might have one or two more studies than the ideal number. It's about 150,000 interviews all told every year.
Phone interviews, or how do you
online surveys. Almost all of them are online surveys.
Yeah. But that's even more interviews than Dan does, which is amazing because he talks to a lot of people. Now, one of the things that's interesting in your report, and it's dovetailed with some stuff I wrote about this week for our new midweek edition of Next TMT about the state of the game business. And they're making more money at 195 billion worldwide, according to Sensor Tower. And Matthew Ball does deep dive stuff on the game business and other places. But the business is worse off in part because, yes, people still play games, but they're playing fewer kinds of games, mostly very well-known franchises. A few new franchises have come up that are promising, but most of us concentrated on 5 big names in each of the kinds of platforms you'd expect. But the competition is other kinds of interactive experiences, including gambling and betting and prediction markets. And you mentioned that 3/4 of fans who bet at least occasionally say that betting makes them follow sports more closely. They literally have some skin in the game and they're into it. And so you can see why the leagues are pretty gung-ho about gambling, even if it keeps making them have to suspend their players for lots of things. I don't know where this goes, but I mean, it is pulling people away from playing games, which are typically more engaging. And I find it really interesting, this stuff that is, it's not just that, it's also things like meme coins and stuff like that.
I will say the report says that betting drives deeper engagement in the game.
It does.
32% say we watch it more closely when they have money on it.
Yeah. I mean, and I wasn't
keep watching, right? That's the thing. You keep watching, even if your team
it's another way to make you care about the team more and follow them more and get more invested in the outcome. I mean, anybody who's ever done, I don't think that finding will come as any surprise to people who have participated in like a fantasy sports league, for instance. But you mentioned video games, and that's it's a parallel. So the things that really engage people today are the experience, especially young people are the ones that are more interactive. And so we found, if you think of what were 2 of the most popular shows of the streaming era were Fallout and The Last of Us, both based on game IP, but based on pretty old game IP. I think the first Fallout game was in like 1997. The Last of Us, that season 1 was based on, came out in 2013. But people, if you think about how much time people spend working their way through those games, like The Last of Us 2, I think is like an 18-hour campaign. And that's if you only play it through once, which most people play it more than that.
And if you're good, as somebody who's not, but has tried it, it takes longer than 18 hours.
It can take a long time, but it's a labor.
Killing those clickers, man, is tough.
labor of love. But if you think about, people investing that much time, not to mention that the game costs $60, why would it shouldn't surprise anyone that person would then go and get a HBO Max subscription to watch 8 more episodes, of the same characters, the same story, the same environment, which isn't exactly the same if you watch some other high profile scripted show. And I think that, for instance, like the government of Saudi Arabia and the Public Investment Fund, they've invested in a Hollywood studio. They've invested in making their nation kind of a gathering place for art and for, they have the big comedian festival. They have their own golf league and a bunch of other sports events. And then they also spent $55 billion to buy Electronic Arts. And so if you think about where this is headed, the biggest, most vibrant, most engaged communities anywhere on earth are sports fans. And if you look at just the very close relationship between NBA 2K and NBA fans, or Madden and NFL fans, and you combine that with this big convergence of technology that we see, social platforms and mobile devices and TVs, I think we're headed for this kind of convergence of IP where if you're an NFL fan or if you're an Eagles fan, you will engage with the video game and the athletes and the social media and the live games and the news and highlights and clips. That will all be organized almost in like a silo of IP about your favorite sport and your favorite team and your favorite players.
It'll be one big chunk. This is the weekend, by the way, for Formula One. It debuts their new season. Cadillac joins for the first time. So you're going to have all crazy. That American car maker muscle behind that. It's the first new team in years. It's going to be on Apple. You're going to have Drive to Survive on both.
Have we already seen F1 in Saudi Arabia? Is it coming to the Middle East?
Not this week.
Yeah, I mean, there's a
Definitely
race.
not this week.
not I mean, there's a race in Dubai. I can't remember where. Maybe there is one in the UAE. I can't remember. But it's a very international sport. It's a second tier sport here, but it's by some metrics the biggest sport in the world. But it is really hard to move some sports from one market to another. You know, it's not hard to get people in England to watch a football game because it looks like rugby, and watching giant people smash into each other is fun no matter what. But it would be hard to launch Major League Baseball in England and fill up Wembley Stadium on the first try, just like if you tried to have a cricket match at Giant Stadium out of the box with no warm-ups, you might not get such a great turnout either. But again, the ability to engage with the athletes and learn about the game and give people a reason to care about the game before you try to make them watch it, I think is a huge benefit. And the benefits are the biggest, I think, for some of the smaller second tier sports where they're unknown by large numbers of people, and the rights to collaborate with those sports are still affordable. You know, pretty soon it's only going to be like the Amazons and the YouTubes of the world that can afford the NFL and NBA rights. But
even Formula One went from $5 million a year in the U.S. to $75 million. I see that there are 2 races in the Arabian Peninsula coming up in April in Bahrain, and then the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix in Jeddah, and then 2 more late in the season in Qatar and Abu Dhabi.
That'll be interesting to see.
4 Arabian Peninsula races are scheduled. The first 2, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. Well, technically it's not a war, but you know.
Yeah.
Well, that'll make them feel much better as they're dodging rocket and drone attacks while also going 205 miles an hour, and their $1 million machines. Should be great.
So anyway, it's a pretty disrupted period in media and technology.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of this compass that you provide, who are you working with? Is it just content company?
No, we work with, at this point, we work with all or almost all of the big traditional pay TV operators and satellite companies, all the big streaming services, some of the smart TV companies, some ad agencies, but basically anybody that has a toe in the water of how people find and choose and consume really entertainment content of all kinds. We specialize in TV, and when we started off, TV was all that we did, but now TV is so inextricably linked with social media and gaming and things like that we kind of cover, I guess you could say we kind of cover entertainment screen time overall.
So is this custom stuff you do?
The ones like the ones we're talking about today that we're best known for, those are subscriptions. So people that subscribe can put their subscription comes with a set of custom questions that they can include that are proprietary. So nobody else sees the answers and no other clients even see the questions. Right. But then we also do one-off proprietary research for all the same companies where they own the research, and we're just answering a very specific question that they have.
So John, are there specific questions without like linking it to any particular, like a certain kind of question you can say, well, a brand wanted to know how they're stacking up against their 5 closest competitors, that kind of stuff? Or what is it? Yeah. What's an example of some of those custom questions that get folded into these things?
We did a big international study on piracy to see where in different countries people are most likely to pirate content and why, and what kinds of things they pirate, and what would be the messaging you could use to get them to stop doing that.
That sounds like a report all by itself, doesn't it?
Oh, it was. Yeah, it was a big one. We've done for a bunch of the streaming providers that are out there, we've done research to help them to design it in the first place. So like, what are the different features it should have? How much can we charge? How much licensed content should we have versus our own originals? We've done a lot of them actually on discovery. That's a big problem that everybody has. But how do we optimize the way that we market our shows? And so a lot of the traditional ways that you would market scripted TV are no longer that effective. But how do we leverage, social platforms that are a competitor, but they're also where most of the TV discovery happens? And then looking at where or when does kind of TV discovery start? All of these TV apps are sort of built on the assumption that people are going to open up a streaming app and they're going to decide what to watch and then watch it right then. But it turns out that by the time somebody logs onto your TV platform, they've probably already got a pretty good idea. They've already done the discovery, and they've done it on Google, or they've done it on TikTok, or they've used ChatGPT. So some of the search and discovery features that are built into streaming platforms often turn out to be a distraction because people have already completed that part of the task, and they're really just trying to.
It just gets in the way, right? I mean,
just trying to find the shortest connection between. What they really want is like an app like TikTok or YouTube where there is no discovery journey. You just open it and the video you want to see is front and center. TikTok, you just open the app and the video plays and you watch it or you swipe it away and the algorithm learns more of what you want to see. So there's very little effort or mental bandwidth that goes into having to find the thing you're interested in.
You mentioned pricing and looking at, for instance, Paramount's plans to merge Paramount Plus with HBO. If you take their top end tier, combine them together, that's a price of like $37 or $38, or something .98, but about $38. And we've got the Fox One app, which is I think 35. I mean, these are way beyond what we used to think was okay. And they say, well, we've got like an ad supported tier that's much cheaper for the person who doesn't mind the ads and doesn't want to pay the extra few bucks. But it does feel like we're starting to really push, $35 a month is 400 a year or more than that. It starts to be a pretty substantial chunk of change. I mean, do you have any sense of sort of like the upper bounds of pricing for these streaming apps?
Yeah,
We'll have fewer of them, but still.
I think it's based more on, is your service differentiated? So does it have something that not every other
Perceived
service
value
has? And one of the big advantages that Netflix has is that they have so much content, and they can have so much content because they have so many users. So there's a lot more people to defray the costs across. Obviously, it's much easier to say this as the devil and many devils are in the details. But I think that a Paramount Plus and HBO Max service could be really compelling, and it would have all the Taylor Sheridan shows on Paramount Plus, all the Paramount movies, HBO. They have a lot of compelling and differentiated content to offer. And if they do combine it, it wouldn't just be like the price of HBO Max plus the price of Paramount Plus, one on top of the other, although there are a lot of people already who pay for both of those individually. But when you combine them, there's a lot of economies of scale to be had, even, not talking about people getting laid off necessarily, but technology that you don't have to duplicate.
Yeah, David Ellison talked about that this week on CNBC. He said, look, we're going to combine these and have a single tech stack, single cloud service provider. We had three of them when we went into Skydance and Paramount, had three of these each and had to really saved hundreds of millions of dollars on that, which is a little surprising to me. It's like, wow, that's okay. That's a big number. Now you're talking about two big services, one that's been rationalized to some extent, and now you're going to add another one.
And I think
it's big money.
The other thing that he keeps talking about that I think is really, it's hard to know exactly what he means, but to me it sounds like the right thing, is that they want to redefine the business, and the the media business in general is in dire need of being redefined. If you just make a new streaming service that's still getting its lunch eaten half the time by YouTube, that's not the same thing as I just think about them, the investments they're making in, the last thing that Taylor Sheridan does for them is going to be that Call of Duty movie. They made this really big bet on the UFC where they spent extra to get all of the rights.
$7.7 billion on that.
Yeah,
that was a big number.
Will they make that back from UFC fans? I mean, probably not, but what they are doing is creating a service that looks different from all of the other services that are out there. And sports are a big part of that.
They also blew up the pay-per-view business, right? I mean, by taking UFC and putting it on a weekly basis there, it just totally changed the economics.
It's a smoking deal. It's the best deal ever.
Yeah.
I'd love to see what Paramount Plus looks like without Taylor Sheridan, because we're going to find out in, 24 months. He's going over to NBC Universal.
Yeah, I'm probably the biggest Taylor Sheridan fan that you'll ever meet. I love all of the stuff that he writes. I've liked him way before he was, back since like Hell or High Water.
You knew him when he was an actor. Is that what you're trying to claim?
From Sons of Anarchy. Yeah, he was damn good.
Yeah.
He was in that Afghanistan movie too.
He was a sheriff.
But yeah, the sheriff of Charming. But so I think that, for one thing, they still have all of the rights to all the shows he's made already. He's got to make a couple more shows. They're already making, I think they can still spin off those shows and people will watch them. And they've showed that they're not afraid to spend on content, on creators. They've got the Stranger Things guys, South Park.
They got the Duffer Brothers coming in. Yep. And their newest show had like 9 million viewers or something this last week.
I watched that. It was no like the first two seasons of Yellowstone, I think, are maybe my favorite shows that I've ever seen. And it wasn't as good as that, but it was still pretty good.
Still pretty good.
And they have 2 more years to come up with other stuff to.
Well, it won't. You know how these things work, though. Those last 6 months, you're not really working really hard for the old guy. You're really kind of tucking things in the top drawer for the new guy.
Or wasn't harmed by his stay in California. I mean, like shows as Californians. We like the shows, but Taylor Sheridan doesn't so much like us.
No, I was going to say, as soon as they run out of yuppies that want to build condos, there's no more Yellowstone. Or as soon as the yuppies figure out they're getting murdered, as soon as they show up in Montana,
right. Or Yellowstone will blow up as a super caldera and wipe them all out. I mean, I think the new movie. Well, I won't go into my dumb joke that I said last issue, but there's a lot of opportunity there for crossover. I can't wait. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that part of what they do. But don't forget, they still got Star Trek, which still has fans. They still got CBS makes shows that a big chunk of America wants to watch.
People don't talk about the CSIs and the NCISs, but those are
Tracker.
Tracker. They're really, really popular. And they're kind of under the radar, and these shows don't have to be water. I mean, look at a lot of the most successful shows are the ones that nobody expected, like Suits or Squid Game. So the fact that again, that's built around these communities, these like-minded individuals who find a piece of content that they like, and it spreads with no real overt marketing. And if you think back to the old days, even if you didn't watch Game of Thrones, you heard about Game of Thrones. But now, if you don't watch Mr. Beast or if you don't watch Squid Game, there's a really good chance you probably never heard of it. And so the shows that are most talked about are, I mean, they're very important, but there are lots and lots of these shows that are under the radar that bring in tremendous numbers of viewers, and they also are very familiar. So if you do another spinoff of it, people will tune in and watch that because they feel like there's a higher likelihood that they recognize it. I kind of equate it to like a Courtyard by Marriott is not the nicest hotel you've ever stayed in, but any city that you go to, there's going to be a Courtyard by Marriott. And when you walk in the front door, you know where to find the desk, you know where to find the little snack bar. Yep, you know how the Wi-Fi works, so it's familiar, and people they're going to watch on TV in much the same way. A lot of times, the thing that looks familiar is a very appealing alternative. If your other choice is just endlessly scrolling, find something new.
You mentioned Call of Duty and the Call of Duty movie. I'll be interested because some of the game research I was talking about, Call of Duty was outsold this year by Battlefield 6 as the most popular shooter in a year that had a lot of shooters. But Call of Duty across all platforms remains one of the big 4 or 5. And I'll be interested to see how they can translate that hard year after year audience, which I think for 18 years in a row was the number one selling game.
Yeah, it's not going to
translate that into a movie.
I don't think that's going to be hard at all. And I think, Taylor Sheridan's probably a really good person to do it. If you watch plenty of his movies or like Lioness or Mayor of Kingstown with the SWAT team, he's very into kind of like an authentic, or Sicario, God, I mean, that's the best one. The very authentic portrayal of military operators and that whole look and feel. So I think if you made a crappy Call of Duty movie, all of those people would still show up and watch it. But I think he's going to make probably a really good one. And Battlefield 6 is kind of amazing. Battlefield 6 is like the faculty lounge version of Call of Duty.
Well, I'll think about that as I go off to play Battlefield 6 in a few minutes. But with that, we probably should wrap this up. I'm going to go to the faculty lounge and get some bad coffee and a 3-day-old donut. But we should wrap this up here. Jon, how can people find you and Hub Entertainment Research in Portsmouth?
You can go to our website, which is hubresearchllc.com. My email is jong, Jong, at hubresearchllc.com. And we also have a free newsletter, a Substack, where we've written a lot about sports and a lot about gaming and other things. And that is at hubintel.substack.com. You can sign up and download articles from there.
Great. Well, you can reach this podcast at nexttmt.com, where you can sign up for our weekly newsletter, which is now becoming semi-weekly, and also get our podcasts that we do for ourselves and for our media partner, Media Play News. As we become a diversified media empire, sign up for free, get the stuff in your email box a couple of times a week. The podcasts are on YouTube, as you'd expect, because we know where those audiences are, because Jon told us, as well as on the podcast services both Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all the other fine places that traffic in audio excellence. This is David Bloom, co-founder of Next TMT, with my co-founder, Daniel Frankel. Thank you, everybody, for listening.